Imagine waking up one morning in a quiet, forgotten village, only to witness something that shatters your entire understanding of the world. Something so extraordinary, so alien, it forces you to question your sanity. If you're watching this right now, stop scrolling. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a revelation. This man didn't seek the truth. It found him, and it changed everything. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment below. I'm ready to see the unimaginable. Because by the end of the story, your view of what's possible might never be the same. It was the year 1935. The world was still reeling from the aftermath of the Great Depression. In a remote village nestled between the hills of Eastern Europe, time seemed to stand still. No electricity, no paved roads, no radios, just silence, broken only by the wind and the sound of shovels hitting soil. Joseph Linde was a farmer, poor, uneducated, and unnoticed by the world. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, but his hands knew the land, his back knew the weight of survival, and his heart had never known fear. Until that morning, the sky was overcast, pregnant with rain. Joseph had risen early, as he always did, feeding the animals before the sun had fully climbed. The fields were soaked in dew. A crow cawed in the distance, and then it happened. A low hum, distant, mechanical, foreign. He stopped. The shovel dropped. The hum grew louder. It vibrated through the earth like a distant thunderstorm, yet the sky was still. No wind, no clouds moving, just that sound, like 1,000 bees trapped in a metal jar. Then he saw it. A shape broke through the clouds, black, with spinning blades that sliced the air in circles. It moved slowly, deliberately, hovering above the hills. Joseph froze. His legs refused to move. His mouth opened, but no words came out. This was no bird. It wasn't a plane either. He had never seen a plane, but he had heard tales from the traveling merchants. This was something else entirely. It hovered, twisting in place like it was scanning the earth. He could feel its presence. Cold, observant, intelligent. He dropped to his knees. From the village, others had started to emerge from their homes. Mothers clutching their children, old men shielding their eyes. No one spoke. No one dared to. Then, without warning, the machine tilted forward and vanished behind the ridge. Gone. No crash. No explosion. Just silence. For several minutes, no one moved. Joseph finally stood, trembling. His eyes met those of Marek, the village blacksmith. Marek whispered, "What in God's name was that?" Joseph had no answer. Word spread quickly. By nightfall, the entire village was divided. Some believed it was a divine sign. Others called it a military weapon. A few, the elders mostly, warned that speaking of it would bring misfortune. But for Joseph, it became an obsession. He returned to the ridge every day, eyes to the sky, waiting. Then, the men in uniform arrived. 3 days after the sighting, a convoy of black trucks rolled into the village. They bore no flags. The men spoke in perfect, cold German, asking questions Joseph didn't understand. They carried notebooks, cameras, and something even more dangerous, silence. They interviewed the villagers, one by one. When they reached Joseph, a translator asked, "What did you see?" Joseph hesitated. He looked at the soldiers, then to the sky. "I saw the future," he said. The soldiers didn't laugh. Instead, one of them handed Joseph a paper with a drawing on it. It was the machine, roughly sketched but unmistakable. "This?" the man asked. Joseph nodded. The soldier's eyes narrowed. He whispered something to his superior. Then they left. No explanation, no goodbye. And just like that, they disappeared. But the silence didn't. From that day forward, strange things began happening in the village. Animals vanished. Lights flickered in the woods at night. Joseph's dreams were haunted by the hum of blades. And every night, he asked himself, "Why me? Why was I the one to see it?" If you've made it this far, comment below. I believe him. Because Joseph's story is just beginning, and what happens next changes everything. The nights in Joseph's village were never truly silent again. After the soldiers left, a shadow lingered, not in the sky, but in the minds of the people. Conversations quieted when Joseph walked by. Children looked at him with wide, cautious eyes. Some said he was cursed. Others whispered that he had invited something unnatural by speaking of the machine. But he didn't care. His world had shifted. The soil beneath his feet no longer felt steady. He had witnessed something that defied every rule of nature and man, and the only thing he feared now was forgetting it. So he began to draw. With charcoal stolen from the hearth, Joseph scratched symbols and shapes into wooden planks and stones. His version of the machine. He sketched the blades, the cabin, the way it hovered like it was suspended by the will of a god. He didn't know why he was doing it, only that he had to. That's when the second sighting happened. It was a week after the soldiers had gone. A young boy named Elias was tending goats near the ridge at dusk when he came running, screaming, back to the village. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale. He pointed to the sky, unable to form words. No one believed him, except Joseph. He took the boy's hand and returned to the ridge. The grass was scorched in a perfect circle. The goats were gone. That night, Joseph didn't sleep. The following morning, he visited the church, the only stone building in the village. He begged Father Mikolai to let him use the bell tower. Reluctantly, the priest agreed. From that day on, Joseph became the village's watcher. Every dawn and every dusk, he climbed a rickety wooden ladder to the top of the bell tower and scanned the skies, looking, listening. It became ritual, and it drew attention. 2 weeks later, a stranger arrived. He wasn't in uniform, no insignia, no accent, just a thin man in a dark coat with a leather satchel and calm, calculating eyes. He introduced himself simply as Herr Klein. He spoke with the villagers, smiled often, asked innocent questions, but Joseph didn't trust him. There was something too precise in the man's behavior, too controlled. One evening, Herr Klein approached Joseph at the tower. "You've seen it," he said. Joseph didn't answer. "I've seen it too," Klein continued, opening his satchel to reveal photographs. Black and white, grainy, but unmistakable. Images of helicopters hovering above barren landscapes, some mid-flight, some blurry, as if caught in motion. These were taken last year, but they're not supposed to exist yet, at least not officially. Joseph frowned. "Then why show me?" Klein leaned in. "Because someone is testing something here, and I believe they chose your village for a reason." Those words echoed in Joseph's head long after Klein left. They chose your village. But why? They had no electricity, no politics, no resources, just old people, cold winters, and traditions that hadn't changed in generations. Unless it wasn't the village they were watching. It was him. Joseph returned to the ridge again the next morning. This time not to wait, but to dig. Something had been left behind. He felt it in his gut. After hours of clawing through the dirt, his shovel struck metal. It was small, barely the size of a shoebox, but heavy. And humming. He pulled it free, hands trembling. It looked like no engine he'd ever seen. No switch, no wires. Just a dark, cold cube with glowing symbols on one side. Symbols that pulsed faintly, as if alive. That night, he didn't tell anyone. He hid it beneath the floorboards of his cottage, wrapped in thick cloth. But the hum wouldn't stop. It was low, nearly inaudible, but constant. And worse, it began to affect his dreams. Joseph saw the machine again, only this time from the inside, through someone else's eyes. Panels lit with strange writing, levers pulled by unseen hands, and a voice, calm, mechanical, repeating the same phrase over and over. Observation complete. Return for extraction. When he woke, he was soaked in sweat. He realized then, the machine wasn't just flying over them. It was watching, recording, learning, and now it had left something behind. If you've come this far, comment. They left a message. Because Joseph's discovery is no longer just a mystery, it's a warning. And what happens next will test everything he thought he knew about his past and his place in this world. Joseph had lived his entire life in the shadows of mountains that never changed. But now, Nothing felt familiar. Not the soil beneath his boots, not the air, not even the ticking of his own thoughts. The object under his floorboard was more than a machine. It was a presence, and it was changing him. The humming, it wasn't just sound. It was frequency, vibration, something that spoke to the marrow of his bones. He began to hear things, not voices exactly, but impressions, like thoughts that weren't his. Images of machinery, of blueprints in a language no man in his village could understand, yet somehow Joseph did. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't stop it. All he could do was document it. He began carving again, but now the sketches were different. Not just a flying machine. Now there were symbols, diagrams, cross-sections of engines and mechanisms he'd never seen in his life. Some looked like maps, others like schematics for devices that didn't yet exist. Father Mikolai saw the carvings and grew fearful. "This is not the work of a man," the priest whispered. "This is something else." Soon, rumors began to spread. People said Joseph was possessed, that he spoke to the wind, that the machine had marked him. And in a way, they weren't wrong, because on the 17th night after the object was unearthed, it activated. No warning, no flash, just silence and then a projection. A beam of pale blue light shot up through the cracks in the floor, filling the cottage with shapes and movement. Joseph fell to his knees as symbols floated in midair, forming a rotating diagram. At the center, a spinning structure that looked exactly like the helicopter he had seen. But then the image zoomed out, and what Joseph saw made his blood turn cold. The machine was one of dozens, hundreds, flying in formation across a vast, unfamiliar terrain. But this wasn't the Earth he knew. The sky was darker, the mountains sharper, and above it all, a monolithic tower, metal breathing alive. It wasn't just a machine. It was part of a system, and Joseph had become its link. The next morning, her client returned. He walked straight to Joseph's door without knocking. "I know what you found," he said. Joseph didn't deny it. Klein entered and sat without invitation. "That device, it's not from here. Not from now. It's what we call a time fragment. A prototype from a future that was never meant to touch this era. And yet here it is." Joseph stared at him. "Why me?" Klein didn't blink. "Because you're invisible. A man no one would suspect. A man who speaks little and listens well. That's why they chose this place. That's why they dropped it here." "They?" Joseph asked. Klein hesitated. "Not us. Not the Germans. Not the Russians either. Something older. Something watching." The words hung heavy. Joseph finally stood. "Then take it. I don't want it." Klein shook his head. "It's too late. The moment you touched it, it recognized you. The connection is permanent." Joseph felt the floor sway beneath him. His lungs struggled to find breath. "So what happens now?" Klein rose and walked to the door. Now you become part of the transmission." That night, Joseph dreamt of fire. He saw the sky open, not with light, but with tearing. Machines pouring through like insects escaping a hive. He saw villages leveled by sound, not bombs. And at the center of it all, himself, standing calmly, eyes glowing with the same blue as the device. The next morning, he woke to find the object gone. Not stolen, not removed. Gone. The floorboards untouched, the cloth still in place. But the machine had vanished as if it had never existed. And yet, he still heard it. Not outside, inside, a resonance deep within his chest. Faint but clear, like his heartbeat had become mechanical. The villagers noticed a change. Joseph stopped speaking. He stopped eating. But he didn't look weak. He looked focused. Every day he returned to the ridge and stared at the sky. Not with fear, but with expectation. And then came the third sighting. This time, no one questioned what they saw, because it wasn't just one machine. It was 5. They moved like they were tethered together, circling above the ridge in slow, synchronized flight. No noise, no blades, just motion, and that same low hum, now echoing through the entire valley. Every villager fell to the ground, except Joseph. He stepped forward, eyes glowing faintly, his voice no longer his own. "They're here," he said. "They're listening." And then the sky began to change. "If you've come this far, come it. He's not alone." Because the story you're hearing isn't about technology. It's about connection between timelines, between machines, and the man they chose. And in the final part of this story, the truth will unfold. Not just about what Joseph saw, but about why it happened and what's coming next. The sky cracked, not with lightning, but with geometry. Above the ridge, where clouds once drifted aimlessly, a perfect circle formed. It wasn't a hole. It wasn't light. It was absence. Like the sky had been peeled open by invisible hands. From this void, a structure began to descend. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't anything man had ever built. It moved without friction, unfolded without hinges. Segments rotated in silence. Panels shifted. It had no cockpit, no visible propulsion, just form and function, crafted by intelligence far beyond human design. And Joseph stood still beneath it, as if it were something he had been waiting for his entire life. The villagers screamed. Some ran. Others dropped to their knees, clutching crosses and muttering prayers through clenched teeth. But Joseph didn't move. His eyes were no longer filled with fear. They were filled with purpose. From the machine, a beam of soft blue light struck the ground at his feet. It didn't burn. It didn't blind. It simply was. A connection. A call. And Joseph answered. He stepped into the light. His body rose slowly, weightless. Dirt and stones lifted around him, dancing like dust in sunlight. As he floated upward, his mouth opened, not in panic, but in declaration. They have returned, because time has chosen. And then he was gone. The machine retracted. The sky healed. Silence returned. For the first time in centuries, the villagers had no words, no myths, no explanations, only absence. Joseph was never seen again. But that wasn't the end. Days later, carvings began appearing on stones near the ridge. Symbols burned into rock, impossible to recreate with fire or blade. They matched the drawings Joseph had made, the schematics, the blueprints, the maps of something greater. And then, the children started dreaming. Not nightmares, not visions, but patterns, numbers, machines, the kind of knowledge no child should possess. One girl, barely 7, told her mother, "They're waiting for the others to wake up." Her Klein returned, but this time he didn't ask questions. He only observed. He took nothing, left nothing, and when asked what he saw, he simply replied, "The transmission has started." Joseph was just the first receiver. The government came next, but they were too late. The valley had changed. Instruments failed. Metal warped. Radios echoed with static that, when slowed, revealed rhythmic pulses, patterns that spelled coordinates. Instructions. A new language was emerging. Not of words, but of design. Something had been activated, and it was spreading. Elsewhere in the world, similar sightings began. Machines hovering silently above forests, oceans, abandoned cities. No contact, no explanation, just observation. They weren't invading, they were retrieving. And slowly, humanity began to realize these weren't enemies. These were harvesters of their own creation, sent from a future where machines no longer needed masters, where time itself had become a tool, not a limit. And Joseph, he became legend. Some say he was taken to be studied. Others believe he was chosen to become one of them, a hybrid between flesh and frequency, a bridge between timelines. But the truth is simpler. Joseph was a man who listened when sky whispered, and because he listened, he became more than just a witness. He became a message. If you reach this point, comment below. I am listening too. Because this story isn't fiction. It's a reflection of something we all feel. The sense that we are being watched. That time is folding in ways we don't yet understand. That something ancient is stirring and calling those who are quiet enough to hear. So if you ever feel the hum beneath your feet, or catch a glimpse of something hovering above the horizon, don't run. Just listen. And remember the name of the man who saw the beginning of everything. Joseph Linda. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story stirred something in you, don't leave just yet. Subscribe, share, and tell us in the comments. What do you think Joseph really saw?